Hello, this is Dr. Scott Finney, and today we're going to look at video number 4, Analyzing Malcolm X. Really, this is going to be all about what was the core basic ideology of Malcolm X. And I think we'll see something very much connected to the person who planted the seed inside of Malcolm X regarding Pan-Africanism. So first, as we look, we can see that Malcolm really took the baton of Pan-Africanism from Marcus Garvey. What is Pan-Africanism? It's an ideology formed by the ideas of those gentlemen mentioned there, great leaders. And Pan-Africanists share a sense of, and this is key, a united African people and her diasporas, meaning those that have been dispersed from the homeland throughout the rest of the world. The belief that African peoples, both on the continent and in the diaspora, share not merely a common history, but a common destiny. And that's vital to understanding the ideology of Malcolm X. And it's all summed up in Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And as it points out there, Pan-Africanism is the idea that people of African descent have common interests and should be unified. And as mentioned with the marker there in London, Marcus Garvey died in 1940 as what was known as the most, I would say, the epitome of what it means to be a Pan-Africanist leader. So let's take a little closer look at what do we mean by Pan-Africanism and how much his impact, that is Marcus Garvey, on the parents of Malcolm X influenced Malcolm X himself. What is Pan-Africanism? It's a sociological, political philosophy that emphasizes the unity and solidarity of all people of African descent globally. It's a movement that aims to encourage and strengthen bonds between all ethnic groups of African descent worldwide. And so this is a global phenomenon. This is a worldwide phenomenon, Pan-Africanism. And as you could see, when we look at the history of civil rights in this country, it wasn't, in the eyes of Pan-Africanists, too narrow. It needs to be not just continental US, it needs to be global, global Pan-African movement. And this is what was consuming Malcolm X. As he spoke about the situation here in this country, his heart was for the globe. What are the key points of Pan-Africanism? Number one, promoting African independence. That was a very, very big thing that didn't take place after colonialism and slavery, all the things that Africa went through from the late 1400s until really 1950s and 1960s, when there were finally a break for independence and new nations of Africa spread across the continent, all 11.8 square million miles, eventually 54 nations there today. Number two, combating all forms of colonialism. That colonialism can be direct or indirect. Number three, fostering economic cooperation, which primarily stands for economic self-determination. And then number four, celebrating African culture and heritage. These are the four key points of Pan-Africanism. And if you look into the words and the writings and the speeches of Malcolm X, you'll find all four of those seeds right there. So here's another answer to what is Pan-Africanism. It's a political, cultural, and intellectual phenomenon which regards Africa, Africans, and African descendants as a unit. It seeks to regenerate and unify Africa and promote a feeling of oneness among the people of the African world. It glorifies the African past and incalculates, pride in African values. So this whole idea of Afrocentricity and the way of looking worldwide, worldview-wise, from an African point of view, using Africa as the unique focal point of reference. So what is the goal? What is the aim of Pan-Africanism? It seeks to address historical injustices, centuries upon centuries, and create a collective identity among Africans worldwide. And as the book mentions there, historical and contemporary Pan-Africanism. And here's the key phrase, the quest for African Renaissance. Malcolm X was on that quest. In the middle of the civil rights movement, he was on a much larger scale, a global scale, an international scale of African Renaissance. And where did he get that baton to run such a race? He got it from the Black Moses, Marcus Garvey. And Marcus Garvey used the Universal Negro Improvement Association, known as the UNIA, in a sense, what you could say W.E.B. Du Bois used the NAACP for his right arm to carry out activities. In the same sense, Marcus Garvey used the UNIA. And it started back in his homeland in Jamaica in 1914, because he saw the caste system there of the British ruling elite class and all of the common people of Jamaica living in such a low class and low way of life. Because of that, he started in 1914 the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And he didn't find enough of a response there in Jamaica. So in 1916, he found that spot of full response, and that was Harlem. And that changed the whole atmosphere and the whole direction of Harlem as the Harlem Renaissance was arising near that same time. And he mainly did his influence and his spreading of Pan-Africanism, as it says there, through speeches. He did not sit and write. He mainly traveled and spoke, and he left quite an impression, as you could see there, even in 1928. So what is the world of Marcus Garvey? It's a world where you come to terms as a person of African descent, as a person of Afrocentricity in your core, come to terms with race in this country, race in this world, and the issue of class internationally as well. And as you could see, he often had the pomp and the flair of a military kind of image, because he wanted to promote anything completely opposite of the enslaved mentality, the up from the slavery view that Eurocentrism had locked African Americans and people of African descent into. So Marcus Garvey was a person who stood for Africa's redemption. And he was so impactful. As you can see, many of times during Black History Month, this discussion about Marcus Garvey comes forth. And as it says there, Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican-born political activist, journalist, entrepreneur, publisher, and orator. He was a charismatic leader that organized the first Black nationalist movement based in Harlem. Garvey's movement served to encourage Black pride and unity of people from African descent. And one of his most famous statements is this: a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And he was often referred to, and still is to this day, as the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. And as it points out, there's something about his dignity. There's something about his principles, his devotion, and his commitment to the unity of the diaspora of people of all African descent worldwide. To the extent that even in Jamaica, as you can see, currency in his image, even the coinage you could see below there. But as you could see from the photographs, he was a dignified man. He was very much a person aware of his stature and the PR approach of how he came across to be the antithesis of the Sambo slave-like figure that Eurocentric America had painted people of African descent. So he had a vision, Africa for the Africans. not only at home, but also abroad. Africa for the Africans. He made that slogan very famous in the 1920s worldwide. And he was a man full of vision, full of sight, and full of, I would say, decades ahead, if not centuries ahead, of his purpose as a leader of Black people. So, in a sense, Africa for the Africans is his philosophy and really embody all of his opinions. And that's exactly what Malcolm X would be speaking forth at the same time while he was dealing with segregation, continental issues, constitutional issues in this country. He was dealing with this whole view deep down inside. This is just a stepping stone here in this country. Africa is the home base. And so the Black Moses of the whole movement of Pan Africanism is really just the man himself, Marcus Garvey, who really brought out for the first time in American history to such a publicized degree this one phrase, Black is beautiful. And of course, it would be revived in the 1960s. But we have to say the father of Black pride is Black Moses, is this Marcus Garvey. And this was what was instilled into Malcolm X. And there's so many books, so many articles written about the UNIA and what Marcus Garvey was doing. And what he was doing was painting a brand new picture, an Afrocentric picture of the history of African Americans and the history of Africans in more particular. And really, in doing so, he pointed out some things that was completely left out of typical history books, and especially public education K through 12 in this country. And that was things of such as the triumphs of African Americans and mainly the triumphs of ancient Africans. Also, the Black aesthetics, this idea that Africans' creativity is far beyond just rhythm, the matter of art, design, architecture. Marcus revived the record, the historical truth of Black achievements in medicine. Individuals like Imhotep, the true father of medicine, far before the Greeks took that claim on some of their individuals. The depths of Black philosophical and intellectual thought. This was a major, major point that Marcus Garvey pointed out in his speeches and in his publication and by means of the UNIA. The heights of African engineering achievements, and even in the area of military feats, ingenuity, and military accomplishments. He would bring all of these things out. And for the first time, cause people of African descent to have a pride in themselves, looking at themselves on their own terms and their own conditions. He was a powerful individual in that way. Here's another famous statement that, I mentioned already, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. This is the one. The Black skin is not a badge of shame, but rather a glorious symbol of national greatness. This is Marcus Garvey, and this was what was running in the blood of Malcolm X. Look to Africa, when a Black king shall be crowned, for the day of deliverance is at hand. He always had a prophetic notion about the brighter future that was coming, not out of any constitution made by man, but out of the roots of Africa itself. We see a new Ethiopia, a new Africa, stretching her hands of influence throughout the world, teaching man the way of life and peace, the way to God. So the life, goals, and achievements of Marcus Garvey cover the theological approach, the scientific, the sociological, the psychological, economic, military. Wherever you find the accomplishment of human beings, Marcus Garvey would point out the Africans were the first to do it and have the longest history of doing such. In that sense, one God, one aim, one destiny, up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will. This was the kind of slogan that was running through the ears of many African Americans right in Harlem, right during the Harlem Renaissance in this country. So Marcus Garvey, he was the message to the people, and he brought in, like I mentioned, this Afrocentric or African philosophy that washed the whole table clear of the Eurocentric approach that was so dominant and so pervasive throughout US history. Here's another great quote. Emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. We are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery because while others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Mind is your only ruler, sovereign. The man who is not able to develop and use his mind is bound to be the slave of the other man who uses his mind. So Marcus Garvey, forever fighting, forever struggling for racial redemption. And in a sense, much, much, much deeper and broader and more expansive than civil rights, Marcus Garvey, and as we'll find out too, clearly Malcolm X both were for human rights. And human rights meaning globally, internationally, not just a set of laws that applies to 48 continental states known as the United States. And in his eyes, there'll be no integrity, no dignity, no respect, and no cooperation or collaboration until the issue of race is settled first. So you have here the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the UNIA. Take advantage of every opportunity. Where there is none, make it for yourself. And as I mentioned earlier, the tragedy of white injustice in this country, in Africa, globally, Marcus Garvey would not hold back, but would run the record out in front of whoever would dare listen. And he was so historically accurate and so full of transparency, it was undeniable what he pointed out. There is no force like success, and that is why the individual makes all effort to surround himself throughout life with the evidence of it. As of the individual, so should it be of the nation. Marcus was the message to the people. And his message was a gospel. It was a good news after being under the avalanche and tsunami of Eurocentrism and degradation of the African image, African way, the African heritage, African history. Now there was the good news, the gospel, according to Marcus Garvey. And you can see at the end, at the bottom there, our cause is based upon righteousness. And anything that is not righteous, we have no respect for, because God Almighty is our leader and Jesus Christ our standard bearer. Rise up, you mighty people, with confidence. You have won before you have started. So he completely brought in Afrocentricity as the air, as the sunlight, as the wind, as the land, as the tree, as the river of our entire existence. He made it such that this was normalized for the first time. And of course, he also started up the Black Star steamship line, kind of mimicking what technological artifact or proof of intelligence that the Titanic was to be for the British. In the same way, he was starting up something known as the Black Star steamship line. But it wasn't just to be building large ships, but it was to actually send African Americans back to their homeland, back to Africa. And he was quite successful at the beginning of this whole idea that the engineering wonders that are within the capability of Africans and African Americans can be manifested in this Back to Africa steamship line. So Marcus Garvey, he's the one who said, restoring our history, not his. The world today is indebted to us, Marcus said, for the benefits of civilization. This, again, a complete reversal of the Eurocentric point of view. And as you could see, W.B. Du Bois, who was there just prior to Marcus, and then Marcus passing the baton on to Malcolm X. And really, I think this says it all. Pan-African movement, Marcus the Messiah Garvey, and Malcolm X. And Malcolm, even though he was fighting for civil rights in this country in a narrow way, he was really fighting for a raised consciousness, a consciousness that it would experience a renaissance known as Pan-Africanism. The political philosophy of Black nationalism means that the Black man should control the politics and the politicians in his own community. The economic philosophy of Black nationalism only means that we should control the economy of our community. The social philosophy of Black nationalism only means that we have to get together and lift the level of our community. And that was as far as the United States went. But remember deep in his heart that this would be a phenomenon, this would be a reality for the whole international brotherhood of people of African descent. Pan-Africanism and Black internationalism. He believed, this is Malcolm, that the struggle for Black liberation is not just an American issue, but a global issue. That Black people across the globe share a common history and culture, something which was deprived to them by generations of European colonialism and imperialism. He encouraged the bonds of solidarity between Blacks and other oppressed peoples all over the globe. And Malcolm put it in his own words, Black liberation is something beyond the United States. And that's something that was intimately tied to struggles for independence across the third world. And embodied in his direction of executing, he was hoping for a brighter future, was the Organization of Afro-American Unity, the OAAU, much like the UNIA of Marcus Garvey. And so Malcolm continued from the UNIA to the OAAU, the same thrust and the same emphasis and the same hopes, aims and objectives that I think quite clear. Free Black Americans from economic oppression, create business opportunities and jobs, establish an environment of security, stability, dignity, and initiative for our youth. Demand justice wherever it becomes evident that the laws as composed and enforced are contrary to the welfare and well-being of our people by any means necessary. Pledge unity and strive for understanding among Black Americans. Restore communication and trade with Africa. So the last slide here in closing. From civil rights to human rights, which includes and which has blossomed in this expression, Black liberation. This is the lasting legacy of Malcolm's ideology. Thank you, and I hope that this was something meaningful to you as we consider what was the mindset, what was the perspective, what was in the depths of Malcolm X's heart. It was really this, Pan-Africanism. Thank you.